Hey guys, thanks a lot for tuning in. My nickname is iFaceBomb, and in this episode we're going to take a closer look at the Swedish autoloading Tier 6 Strv M42-57 premium medium tank. During this tank review we will be looking into whether if it's worth buying, how its tank statistics look. We will also compare it against a few of its competitors, including the currently strongest Tier 6 tank, at least according to the current meta. Furthermore, we will perform an armor profile rundown with focus on its weak spots and strength, and afterwards I will take you guys alongside a single battle that I have selected for you guys today, which will hopefully give you an idea of this tank in action. Keep in mind guys that this replay features my secret agent wannabe skills to its fullest. And finally I will finish up with a quick sum up and my rating of this Swedish tank. Okay guys, so is this Swedish Tier 6 tank anything worth, especially when compared against so many other quite good Tier 6 tanks out there? The thing is, when walking quickly through the tank statistics, then it might not look that impressive, especially when you look at its hidden statistics, as they definitely do not make it look any better. The gun handling, the acceleration and speed is mediocre at best, and furthermore, it has zero armor. Yes, it has an autoloader, but still, is it really enough to make this tank playable? But there is something about it that makes me quite like this tank, and the more I play with it, the more I start to appreciate it and feeling that this tank maybe, just maybe, is slightly overpowered. Or is it? Let's see. Let's do a quick stats rundown with my current crew and tank setup. Okay, let's take a look at the crew that I'm using in this tank. Is the one from the UDIS 14.5, and they have specialized in Band of Brothers, view range and gun handling skills. Especially this tank can really take a big advantage of a very skilled crew. For the equipment, I have selected improved rotation mechanism, binoculars and a turbocharger. We'll go into more details in a second. For the ammunition, I have selected 32 armor piercing shells that is capable of dealing 150 damage with a penetration of 148 and a mediocre shell velocity of 925. In addition, I have also fitted 28 APCR shells, which features a very nice penetration value of 190 and in addition a nice shell velocity boost of more than 200. For this particular tank, as it features an autoloader, I have not selected any high explosive because the APCR shells should be more than enough. And for the consumables, small repair kit, small first aid kit, and for this particular tank I have selected coffee with cinnamon buns. But keep in mind guys that I in general only add food for the tanks that I either enjoy very much to play with or that are so bad that they only work with food. Okay, for the stats with the current crew, as we just saw, 150 average damage per shell, which features an average penetration of 148. The thing is, what makes this tank quite unique, because 150 alpha damage, yes, it's not really groundbreaking. The T-34-85 features an alpha damage of 180. The thing is, yes, it has the autoloader, but it's not just any autoloader, because keep in mind this is Tier 6, but even for a Tier 6 autoloader, it actually features, yes, 4 shells. So you will have the potential of dealing 600 damage. Might not sound that much, but keep in mind guys, this is Tier 6. Yes, it is not very uncommon that tanks in this tier has around 800 HP, which means that this tank is nearly capable of clipping a tank. And furthermore, it only has a 2-second interclip reload speed. So yes, it means that in 6 seconds you will be able to deal a potential damage of 600, which I must say is quite impressive, because that can open up for opportunities to take head-on tanks that has been slightly damaged or that are just at Tier 5 or lower, where you will be able to clip the tank. And another fantastic thing about this gun is the reload speed, because notice I have a reload speed of only 14.69. So the gun looks fantastic at this current stage, but yes, there are of course some hidden figures, and the hidden figures looks worse than you might think. But do they completely spoil the tank? We will of course take a deeper look at it when we are going to reach the comparison. Okay, then we have a gun traverse speed of 40.1, nice, and a gun depression of -6. Do notice that the gun elevation is only 12 degrees. The aiming time is 2.06, which is definitely needed for a tank that changes its clip every 2 seconds, and it features a dispersion of 0.31. But of course keep in mind guys that I have food fitted and the crew has 4.5 skills. The DPM itself of 1740 is nothing special, but it's an autoloader. It's all about that burst damage potential. The HP value 780, hull armor 55-30-20 and turret armor 40-20-20. Quick spoiler guys, this tank has no armor. For the engine power 366, which makes this tank feel quite sluggish. This is also why I have fitted a turbocharger for this tank. The funny part is that this turbocharger can actually be switched to the first equipment slot and also receive an additional bonus. It was quite an interesting dilemma for this particular tank. So what do I prefer? Do I prefer that the turbocharger will get that additional boost, or do I prefer that the improved rotation mechanism will give that 2.5% extra to its bonuses? And I ended up with getting that boost on the improved rotation mechanism, and that is simply due to that the hidden gun mechanics are very poor. They can be very challenging at times when you're firing your second, third or fourth shell. So my priority have been to decrease the gun dispersion to as much as possible. And yes, the tank unfortunately does not have the option to fit the vertical stabilizer. So with the turbocharger, we're able to achieve a horsepower per ton value of 14.1. So this figure looks sluggish. And yes, it's not a fast tank. The good part is that the terrain figures, which we're going to see in the comparison, are actually not that bad. The top speed that we can reach in this tank is 49, and surprisingly a quite nice reverse speed. But of course guys, in this case we are helped by the turbocharger. For the traverse speed, 52.35, very nice. And for the concealment values, 26.41 with my current crew. When stationary, 6.18 when firing, and when moving, 25.3 or 4.8 when firing. The view range, 488. Yes, you could of course switch this to coated optics, but at least for me I prefer to have the advantage, especially at this tier, of a binocular. And last, a fine signal range of 756. So far so good, but how does it compare against other tier 6 tanks? Let's take a look. Okay guys, so for this comparison, I have selected to compare the Stridsvagn M42-57 against the Skoda T25 and the Soviet T3485M. Because I have chosen to include the T3485M in this comparison, it's just to show you guys how it compares against the currently strongest tier 6 tank, at least when playing strongholds. And the question is, how many light years is the T3485 ahead of the Stridsvagn, or is it? Okay guys, so let's start out with the DPM. And as always, as this is an autoloader, it doesn't feature a very impressive damage per minute of 1636. Neither does the Skoda T25, which features a 3-shot autoloader. For the penetration values, the Stridsvagn 148, Skoda T25 132, and the T3485 144. For the alpha damage, 150, 110, 180. Keep in mind guys that the very important value here is the potential damage, at least for me, because the potential damage of the Stridsvagn is 600. For the Skoda, it's only 330. Yes, the intra-clip reload speed, check this guys, 1.33 seconds. It will only take you 2.67 seconds to fire those 3 shells. The problem arises that 330 damage, it's rarely enough to kill off a tank. And I remember when I was playing the Skoda T25, I was very hopeful that I would simply love this tank. But the problem arises every time that the clip damage is just so low. That means you have to put all 3 shells in every time to just deal that 330 damage. And in those scenarios, it is not very hard for the T3485M to get an advantage over you in the majority of scenarios. But the 600 clip damage potential in just 6 seconds from the Stridsvagn, that's a lot for a tier 6. That means that you can challenge and destroy a slightly injured enemy tank, at least if it's a tier 6 of course. And the last interesting figure for the firepower is the shell velocity of 925, which places it in the middle, at least in this comparison. For the gun handling, the aim time is 2.3. Yes, it can be challenging because when you have an intra-clip reload speed of 2 seconds, you will have the challenge of not being fully aimed when your next shot is ready. Luckily, you have a better base gun dispersion of 0.35, but the problem arises when moving or traversing the tank. If this was a tier 8, yes, this would be really heavy tank territory, but of course keep in mind guys that this is tier 6. But still, this is challenging figure, and this is also why I have fitted the improved rotation mechanism to reduce the gun dispersion to as much as possible. Do notice that even when traversing the turret, you still reach a quite high value of 0.18, which is quite a lot, even when we compare it against the Skoda T25 or the T3485M. And yes, the gun elevation that I mentioned in the garage, it is quite low, of 12 degrees, and the gun depression of 6 is pretty standard, so nothing special here. For the mobility, here we are falling behind again with 45 an hour. All 3 tanks share the same reverse speed, but as this tank features a quite weak engine, it unfortunately can feel quite sluggish with the 13.28 horsepower. I definitely remember that before the equipment 2.0, this tank's gun dispersion and speed was my 2 biggest problems, and now with the new equipment, it just made this tank so much better. It is not perfect even with the new equipment, and yes, the change might seem small, but this is a tank that is on a knife's edge regarding if I like it or not. And that little thing, that extra speed boost and that extra decrease of gun dispersion, it means quite a lot regarding how enjoyable this tank feels. Another interesting figure is the terrain resistance. As this tank is quite weak in regarding of the horsepower per ton, it features way better terrain resistance numbers on the hard and medium terrain, at least when comparing against the other two tanks in this comparison. Turret traverse of 32 is not groundbreaking, especially if we're comparing it against the T-3485M. The tank traverse is quite nice with 38. For the armor, so we're going to take a very quick look at the armor profile in just a second. And for the last figures, we have the view range of 350, nothing groundbreaking, and this is also why I have chosen to fit the binoculars. And last, standard radio range of around 710. Do notice that the T-3485M receives a radio range of 525. I don't know if it's just me, but it seems like every time Wargaming overpowers a tank, they're going to punish it severely by reducing its radio range. I noticed similar figures on the CS52 list that I reviewed some weeks back that also received a similar penalty. Okay guys, let's take a super quick look at the armor profile. And yes guys, in general, if you can bounce anything in this tank, yeah, well done. Yes, it has a few extreme well-angled sides, but keep in mind guys that the impacted armor we are looking at is only 30 millimeters. Even this part here that has a very nice angle of around 75 degrees is only featuring an impacted armor of 30 millimeter, which despite its angle can be overmatched rather easily. Just below we are featuring figures of around 72, 55, and the side armor on the turret around 20 millimeters. On the upper hull we're starting at around 30 millimeter and finish at 25 millimeter, and for the side 30 millimeter with a few exceptions of 40 millimeter. For the rear of the turret 20 millimeter, 10 millimeter, 30 millimeter, and 20. So yeah, in general guys, this tank really has no armor whatsoever. Okay guys, let's take a look at a gameplay that hopefully will give you guys an idea of this tank in action. Okay guys, so here we are on Mannerheim line in a tier 6 battle. So yes, I could go to the B line, but I'm thinking, because this tank has that much potential, definitely the burst damage potential, then I'm thinking maybe I can take advantage of that down here at the H9 line. Hopefully we're going to get some comrades with us. As soon as the enemy fires a shell, we should be able to fire back, maybe even all those 4 shells. Let's see how the game turns now. See the T-34, enemy T-3485 is to join us. He got damage. Yeah, keep in mind guys, we have a potential of 600 damage, but of course that is, can be quite well armored, that tank, especially if we angle it quite properly. But he's showing us out. 1 shell in, 2. Thanks for that Euro rush into that one. You might notice already the advantage we had that scenario, but as soon as he got damage, I didn't feel that scared of going in, and yes, I would take 1 hit, but you would get 4. And most likely that could be enough for us to take him out. And the tank that features a reverse speed of 20 an hour actually quite fast get back again or hide again at the corner of the hill or rock, whatever you have at your disposal to reload. The reload speed of those 14, 15, 16 seconds, depending on the quick pressure, yeah, it's not that bad. And yes, here we're trading shots one by one, so of course the autoloader is not used at its fullest. But it doesn't do that much because it reloads quite fast. If it was like, let's say 35 seconds, that would quite annoy me because the whole advantage of an autoloader disappears. So yeah, we took definitely quite a beating when we were fighting against a similar tank. So I noticed on this tier, where the HP pool is so low, it takes no time to destroy tanks, to be honest. One. Gotta get away. Always worried about artilleries at this spot here. Awesome. some nice spotting for that. Frey, again we got spotting. There's a very nice push from the second line, or the line here. Let's see. From our team, so that's good. Maybe if the enemy tanks will start to look towards that spot, we might get some opportunity shots. But yeah, I have 64 life left at this current stage, so yeah. Definitely a bit worried. Spotting. Should enter that one. I cannot show too much of my tank. As a team, we were leading already to 6-2, so it looks quite good. Can I put a shot into that? Yeah. So yeah, notice those 15 seconds don't matter that much. Especially this reach line where we just peak up like once every, what, 8, 9, 10 seconds. I'm worried about that VK behind the rock over there. So quite a lot of tanks still right here. Unfortunately, we have lost all the tank contribution on this A.2 line. I must say that this particular map has some quite strong camp location, especially here. Most you see always the enemy team just rush through there, but in those scenarios where the enemy just camps at around this J4 line or H4 or 5 line, it can be very hard to go through. Shoot to the Hellcat. Yeah, a bit lucky shot. Another. Ah. I'm a bit worried always get through. Okay, let's do it. Let's do it, guys. I'm thinking this should have enough speed to do this thing. Yeah. Oh, so far, yeah, so far so good. Just quick note. Come on, quick notice, guys. While I'm drowning, yes, I have drowned quite a few tanks. You definitely need to have a horsepower per ton. Get some air. Yeah. Down again. Definitely need to have a proper horsepower per ton. There we go. Cheers, Bond. Okay, back to the game. So we can clean up. It's 12-8. Because I'm always worried about the HP. So my 64 act as support, but not at the final push, because any shell would really kill me off. Dangerous. Go away. One into him. Another was shooting there. Yeah. Again. And there we go. 1,598 damage and 1,429 spotting. So, the Strv M42-57. Is it anything worth? The thing is, I quite enjoy this tank, despite its many flaws, like the lack of armor, lack of speed, lack of gun handling. In some ways, this tank reminds me of the AMX 5100 that features the 6-shot autoloader with a potential damage of 1500, which is in some cases enough to kill another tier 8 vehicle. Yes, the AMX 5100 features a gun that takes nearly 50 seconds to reload. And yes, back in the days, at least when I started playing World of Tanks back in 2013, 2013, it was the strongest tank in game, and now you never see the tank in action because it is simply so outdated. But for the sheer damage potential, for the destruction potential, where you can kill off a tank in one clip, this tank comes very close, and it only have a clip reload speed with my current setup of 14.69 seconds. And yes, the tank is not the fastest, but with the turbocharger fitted and the hidden terrain resistance values, it really doesn't feel that sluggish as it should be, at least not when you compare it against other similar tanks that features the same horsepower per ton value. So yes, with a well-trained crew that will give you that boost for your gun handling, and with the backup of the coffee with cinnamon buns, then this tank is not only enjoyable but quite deadly in a lot of situations. So yeah. So how many facepalms would I give this Swedish auto-loading tier 6 medium tank? And it is actually quite a good question, because my original thought has been 3 facepalms, but due to the factor that this tank actually makes me smile, of its sheer destructive power and that you can rack up that many kills in a game, then I must say the more I play with this tank, the more I learn to handle its weaknesses. I take advantage of its quite impressive gun that has such a deadly damage potential for this tier. So how many facepalms? It is 4 facepalms. And I must say, if this tank was sharing the same armor profile as the T-3485M, then actually I would prefer to use this tank in strongholds rather than the T-3485. But because the T-3485 has such a way better armor, which when angled properly can be quite hard to penetrate, then it makes it more reliable overall. But for the sheer fun factor and the enjoyable factor and the laughter or even smile factor when playing with the Stridsvagn M4257, yes, it is quite nice feeling when playing with this tank. Yeah, I definitely enjoy playing this tank. Yes, the T-3485M is better, and of course even the Type 64 would be better, or even the Cromwell. But for the sheer fun and burst damage potential, then I quite enjoy this tank. Do keep in mind, guys, that this particular tank is currently available to purchase from the tech tree, and here down in the bottom you can see the Stridsvagn M42-57. And at least in my opinion, it was one of the best lower tier purchases that I have made. Okay guys, I hope that this tank review was helpful towards your decision on whether to buy it, and thanks a lot for watching, guys. This was my tank review number 16. I hope you enjoyed it, and let me know what you think of the Swedish Strv M/42-57 in the comments below. And if you like to see more crazy content from my side, feel free to leave a like or even subscribe. It's a big thumbs up for me and I appreciate it a lot. Cheers guys, take care and see you next time.